Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So first I would like to thank Jeff Taylor for putting this compilation together. Please go watch the original video on his channel, or at least go to his channel and subscribe. But now this is the only party that I would vote for in the United Kingdom as it stands. Watch the entire video. Tell me whether or not this seems different from all the other dross that we've been served up. And if you are going to vote for Reform UK, good luck, sir.
Culture is a rich, woven web of brilliance, morality, customs, behaviors, laws, art, music, architecture, a shared history, shared values, language. Why do they wish to denounce our national heroes? Because they want to cut our connection with our history, our common history. Why do they wish to decolonize the English language? Because if they can control language, they can denounce our culture. Why do they make laws like bringing into a body of British law the European Convention of Human Rights, the Human Rights Act? Because they want to set aside what it means to be a British citizen. This is the effect of 30 years of government policy. Well, it has to stop now. Yes. We know what British culture is. But before I start, can I just say, isn't it peculiar that a so-called racist party has a multi-ethnic leader? You lot clearly don't know what you signed up for. But on a more serious note, there are some anti-racist people outside, and the reason we were slightly delayed starting this conference was because they're blocking our live stream signal, and we were trying to get that fixed. So for all their moral correctitude, actually they would wish to silence us. They wish to silence what we have to say. We will not let them silence us. When I first indicated on the 30th of June 2025 that I was going to I was considering launching a political party, I set two hurdles for the party. The first was that we would have to hit 30,000 members. And I thought that might be a get out of jail free card, that I wouldn't hit it and that I could retire back to my normal life and say, well, I gave it a shot, it didn't work. Within a couple of months, we hit our target. And if you had said to me then that in 6 months, Ben, you will have nearly 40,000 members, you would have fought your first council by-election and got 12.3% in it. Where's the wonderful Alex Stevenson? And that you, at the time of speaking on your first policy, you would have a candidate standing in a by-election that has got so riled up my erstwhile party that they've been denouncing him non-stop on X. I won't name the party, I think you can guess. But for all the banging of drums that party does about freedom of speech, actually, it stands against it. It wishes to silence Nick Buckley. How astonishing it must have been for them that a political party wished to stand a candidate in an election. How bizarre a concept is that? But as Nick said, whatever happens in that by-election actually won't make a jot of a difference on the national stage, but in one respect. If we do well in that by-election, it will send a seismic shock through Westminster. It was absolutely vital we stand. Absolutely vital, and that's why they didn't want us to do it. Please go up to Gordon and Denton, support Nick Buckley, and let's win this by-election. I want to thank the Emmanuel Centre particularly, because the location of this venue was given away earlier this week, and following the disclosure of the location, they were inundated with the so-called anti-hate people trying to shut us down, the anti-racists trying to shut us down, and they held their ground. And the only way we're going to prevail, ladies and gentlemen, is if we all hold our ground. We must not bend. We must keep standing up, whatever they do and whatever they say. The exact direction of travel that we will set for this country will be known. There will be no ambiguity in our policies. It won't be a manifesto put together within 3 weeks. Isn't it peculiar, ladies and gentlemen, that political parties stand for government and they produce a manifesto 2 or 3 weeks before the election, full of nonsense, none of which ever gets delivered. That has to change. And so we will have draft legislation. And the benefit of having draft legislation, there's multiple benefits. The first of which is that the British people know precisely what it is we're going to do, so we can't let them down. We've made it crystal clear. The next benefit, and this is really important, is that the Lords can't interfere with it. The civil service can't interfere with it. When I walk into the Commons in May 2029 for the first time as Prime Minister, that is the risk of being a leader of a political party. You may end up as Prime Minister, but when I walk into the Commons, I'm going to thump this document down, this draft legislation, and I'm going to look across to the opposite benches, and I'm going to address the Lords, the civil service and the British people, and I'm going to thump this document down and say, I have the democratic backing of the British people. We have one last chance to save this country. I think I can't remember who said it earlier, but it took 1,000 years to build this great country. It's taken 30 years to trash it. And we have to save it, and save it we will. The first thing was that we realized, the group of people that were drafting it and myself, that actually there's something more fundamental that has to underpin not just our immigration policy, but all our policies. It is who we are. What are we as a country? Who are we? What do we wish to be? How do we wish to move forward? Unless you've established that principle, those sets of principles, you're at sea making other policies. You won't know how to make the other policies you need to make to save the United Kingdom if you can't first establish who we are. And I'm afraid, as much as Keir Starmer and the liberal globalist lunatics would like to categorize British culture as something of an inferior debate. They call it the culture wars. We're not going to entertain the culture wars. As much as they might wish to categorize it as that, actually British culture is what we're fighting for. When we went to war against Hitler, we didn't go to war for economic advancement. We went to war to save our way of life, to save our constitution, our culture, our people. And we are at that point again. There aren't guns being fired, but we're at a point where we have to fight that same battle for our way of life. So, the government, in its desire to set aside this nation, has defined cultural nationalism as far right. How many of you in this room were aware of that before I just told it to you? A few. The government of the United Kingdom has denounced British culture. If you look up far-right terrorism, you will find that it defines it as violence perpetrated in the pursuit of far-right ideologies, and one far-right ideology that it cites is cultural nationalism. Without a culture, we have no nation state, and they would like to diminish our culture, tell us that those of us who believe in it are far-right, and at the same time, Tell us that cultures coming from abroad should be celebrated, championed, have a protective cloak put around them, and we should take the heed to their cultures. Enough of that. Yes. They have traduced our culture to such an extent that actually when people are asked, well, what does it mean to be British? We're reduced to ridiculous platitudes such as, well, being nice, being tolerant. Well, it's a hell of a lot more muscular than that, I have to remind people. British culture is a rich, woven web of brilliance. And I've highlighted a few points on the screen, as you can see. Morality, customs, behaviors, laws, art, music, architecture, a shared history, shared values, language. Why do they wish to denounce our national heroes? Because they want to cut our connection with our history, our common history. Why do they wish to decolonize the English language? Because if they can control language, they can denounce our culture. Yes. Why do they make laws like like bringing into a body of British law the European Convention of Human Rights, the Human Rights Act? Because they want to set aside what it means to be a British citizen. This is the effect of 30 years of government policy. Well, it has to stop now. Yes. We know what British culture is, and all of you will recognize what those words mean, and they play into each other. Morality manifests itself in our art. Our history manifests itself in art, in music, our architecture, our great forefathers who built wonderful buildings and statues, who now we're told are racist, and they need to come down. That is just a lie. It is an attack on our culture. Of the same culture. You are our family and I am your family. And that's how it has to be. Our culture is freedom, nation state, duty and patriotism. Being a British citizen is a huge privilege, but it comes with duty. You owe this country something for being a citizen. As Andy died, I think he said he's served 10 years in the Paras. That is fulfilling your duty. I've had a great life. I'm trying to fulfill my duty now by giving back to the British people. And you're all here because you're fulfilling your duty, because you see we're imperiled. That sense of, that contract between the state, between the people. It's not just about the state giving. We have to give back. And I'm so pleased to see so many people re-engage, because you are all giving back to this country. You are going to save this country through that cultural commitment. We've forgotten what aspiration is. Every time something goes wrong, we look at the state and say, well, can you please save us? Can you do something? Can you spend more money? We've got 8 million people out of a workforce of 35 million who are surviving on universal credit. And yet we keep saying we haven't got enough people in the economy, we've got to take in more migrants. It is ridiculous. We need aspiration reinstalled in the United Kingdom so people wish to come off dependency, wish to go into work, and we're going to reveal a couple of those policies in a second that's going to help do that. We set up the ECHR not because the United Kingdom needed to be policed, its human rights needed to be policed. Our human rights have existed for over 1,000 years. It was the Europeans who needed the European Convention of Human Rights because they just can't help tearing themselves apart. In the pursuit of human rights, we are forgetting what it means to be us. And we're not being allowed to put British national interests first. We're not allowed to put British people's interests first. And in fact, we get the bizarre result that often we will protect criminals and denounce victims, as we've seen with the rape act. All of that comes from the European Convention of Human Rights as put into the body of British law through the Human Rights Act. That was one of Blair's initial gifts to the British people, and we are going to repeal it on the first day in government. We are going to abolish the Equality Act. There's nothing There's nothing about equality in the Equality Act. The Equality Act produces inequality. It informs us that you will be judged by the color of your skin, your ethnicity, your religious beliefs, not by the content of your character. Quite the opposite of what Martin Luther King had in mind. The Equalities Act has to go, and that will go on the first day of the British country. All hate speech laws will be abolished. And now the last one, and you might think, why the hell is Ben going back to the withdrawal agreement that got us out of the European Union? Well, the withdrawal agreement is a bastardization of the United Kingdom. It did not give effect to our leaving the EU. What it did was rearrange the United Kingdom's relationship with the EU. In many ways, it made it worse. And I think all of you know that if we are still embedded, infected with the global order, we will never be able to put this country first. And there's something particularly bad about the withdrawal agreement, and many of you, all of you perhaps, have heard me speak about it before, which is the Northern Ireland Protocol. We have become... A lot of people think Northern Irish politics is a minority sport. It isn't. When a country puts a flipping border down the middle of itself and heaves off over 1 million citizens to a foreign power, subject to foreign laws adjudicated by a foreign court, you know that country has lost its way. The Northern Ireland Protocol is not just about Northern Ireland. It is about us rediscovering who the hell we are. Are we going to stand by our British brethren, or are we going to throw them under a bus? I know what I'm going to do. And we are going to get rid of the withdrawal agreement. And there'll be a whole policy on how we're going to deal with the EU, none of which von der Leyen is going to much enjoy reading. Now, there's been a lot of talk of Christianity, and of course we are a tolerant country, but we must never forget that we're not just culturally a Christian country, we are constitutionally a Christian country. We must How is it that it has come to be that people talk about the United Kingdom as if it's a multi-faith country? Sure, you can have different faiths. You can be an atheist. You don't have to believe in Christianity. But if you live in this country, you must recognize that this is a Christian country. Starmer wants to remove the bishopric from the House of Lords. Why does he want to do that? I mean, the bishopric are a pretty useless bunch of people now, because the Church of England itself has lost its way. But the reason he wants to remove the bishopric from the House of Lords is because he wants to remove the last constitutional vestige of Christianity manifesting itself in our constitution. He wants it gone. And then it's a hop and a skip to say, well, actually, we're a multicultural, multi-faith nation, and that's the end of Christianity at the heart of things. So the first policy we're going to introduce is that parliamentarians, public officers, anyone taking public office of any description has a choice. They can either swear on the Bible or they can swear on a neutral oath, but there will be no swearing on a foreign religious text. We will promote our Christian heritage, our culture. If you go back to the slide where I laid out what culture means, Christianity infuses every part of that, our art, our buildings, our statues, what we fought for. If you go into a church in this country, you all know this. You go into a church in a foreign country, and what you see are trappings of Christianity. You walk into a church in this country, and you see the trappings, obviously, of Christianity, but you see also, alongside them, the heritage of this country played out through remembering those who died in the various villages where these churches are, those who died in the great wars protecting this country, protecting our Christian heritage. Our church and our heritage and our great military past, which is very, very important to this country, they all go hand in hand, and we will reinforce that Christian heritage. And we will prohibit the conversion of churches to foreign religions. When you see a church being converted to another religion, that religion is basically saying, we've beaten you. We've taken your building. That is going to stop. How is it that our flags have become so toxic to the British people? There's nothing toxic about our flags. Yes, they're Christian too, by the way. They're Christian too. Maybe that's why people find them offensive. But our national flag, it'll be mandatory under an advanced government. Our national flag will fly on every building that is of public ownership. And we will recognize our great heroes and national figures. We're not going to allow statues to come down. Amen. If you let your statues come down, you forget who you are. And I did a debate recently at the Oxford Union in which I talked about Cecil Rhodes in glowing terms. You can imagine the kind of response that got. But the Rhodes Scholarship was bequeathed by Rhodes, saying that it should be blind to ethnicity and religious beliefs. Right. Did you know that, folks? He was not a racist. He was a good man. And we are allowing our national heroes to be denounced. That has to stop too. And I want to also nod here, if I may, very briefly. I've only got 30 seconds left, but I'm going to go over time because there's a lot more to get through. I'm going to nod very briefly to the people Paul Thorpe remembered in his little speech. For every national hero we have, Wellington, Winston Churchill, Nelson, the Duke of Marlborough, behind them stood hundreds and thousands and millions of working class people. It is the British working class on whose back this country was built, and we forget them at our peril. When Nelson said, "England expects every man shall do his duty," people, the working class who manned those ships, weren't petrified, as I perhaps might have been. They cheered. They went into the French and Spanish fleet, bold in heart, and they laid down their lives to save our country. That is what culture is. The British working class are our culture. We will fund councils to promote quaint old things like Christmas and Easter. And we will speak English in every public sector. We have to do away with this decolonization of the UK. Again, that's an attack on our heritage. It's an attack on our culture. It's an attack on who we are. We will recolonize the curriculum. We will teach our constitution to our children. We will teach them about the contract that the British state has with citizenry, where citizenry get privileges because they're citizens, but then they have to stand up for the country as well. We will teach our children how our Christian forefathers have actually been a force for good, not the kind of Christianity that the anti-racist lot outside would like us to think. Yes. Just remind everyone that our national anthem is actually a hymn. It's a hymn, and we will sing it proudly in every state sector school and all our universities. It will be celebrated. At the heart of all of this is the family. And we are going to protect the family. We are going to destigmatize actually having children. We're going to destigmatize women looking after their children. And we're going to do that practically as well. This idea that you should reward people who can't afford to have children through a dependency culture of handing out benefits is wrong. Benefits for having children should be removed. You should be encouraged to have children through the tax system. You should be encouraged to get married. You should get a tax break for every child you have. You should get a tax break. And you should be encouraged to stay at home and look after your children by getting a tax break. Get the tentacles of the state out of my family. The last line here you might think is a bit odd. Why has he suddenly put in a tax policy under the family? Well, let me tell you, inheritance tax is an evil tax. It raises not much for the exchequer, but it's a fantastic tool for the far left because it forces families to sell their homes, break their connection with the country, sell their businesses, break their connection with the economy of the country, sell their farms, break the connection with making food domestically in this country. It is an attack on the connection between the British people, its heritage, our heritage, and the land. And that's what they want to do. Inheritance tax, if we want to save the country, inheritance tax has to go. We have to reintroduce, I touched on this briefly before, we have to reintroduce aspiration. You have to know that when you work, you will be rewarded for it. How can you go forward with confidence during the day if you think that every time you earn a pound, the government's going to reach into your back pocket and nick it, and then use that money actually to keep those people who refuse to work in the state that they can, and not to send the foreigners who come to this country. And we've got to be grown up. We do need to make our accounts stack up. And other political parties won't talk about it. But we must cut back welfare. If you don't work, you will not get paid. We're going to pursue British farming. I'm going to have to rush a bit, folks. We're going to pursue British farming. We're going to protect the countryside from new build housing. It's not necessary. exhausted villages and town centres across the country, full of property that's vacant, that can be repurposed. You know why we can't repurpose it? Because of net zero. We can't repurpose it because of net zero, so they go and build on the green countryside. It's lunatic. And they take our country, once the countryside's gone, it's gone. We will reverse that. And we will prohibit the removal of farms from the fabric of British culture. Andy talked about the risk of prosecution when you serve this country, but there's also something else that we've done for our veterans, which is absolutely horrendous, or haven't done for our veterans, is we've turned our backs on them after they have served the country. We don't give them housing, we don't give them priority housing. We don't look after the mental health issues that they often have when they come back from war zones. We give them no mechanism by which they can come back from the extreme conditions in which they have fought to protect this country, to find their feet again in society in this country. We have to repurpose them, if you like. They need a helping hand when they come out. And we will obviously get rid of any, I mean, I love the way Andy said it, you know, if we're going to put an officer or a member of the military on charge, well, then it has to go all the way up to blooming cabinet ministers. That's a good one. I think that would be the end of the prosecution of anyone in the military. We're going to get rid of dual nationality. Either you're British or you're not. Yep. We will define multiculturalism as an extreme far-left form of ideology, which we will denounce. Even integration is not good enough. People have to be assimilated into British culture. There can be no foreign religious courts in the United Kingdom. There can be no public calls to prayer. And as much as I would wish not to have to use the law to bring our culture back into balance, things are so out of balance that I'm afraid we have no option now but to ban the burqa. But finally, we will ban first cousin marriage. Now, I've spoken for 6 minutes beyond what I was allocated. I'm going to shut up. I hope you get another dose of me in a second. But I want to say one last thing. What you've just seen is just a synopsis of the draft policy. The draft policy for the restoration of our culture, which will underpin every other policy we make, is a thug document. I'm very grateful to David for having produced it, and if I may, I might take a bit of gratitude for having distilled it. Thank you very much, folks. So this. I think I did warn you there was a second dose, didn't I? Yes. This is the policy which we had conceived this event for, the immigration policy. As I said, I think when I first spoke, that it's the preeminent issue exercising everyone's mind. And so, before I start, I just want to say this. Isn't it peculiar that even though it's the preeminent policy in the electorate's mind, we don't know where the Tory party stands on immigration? Yes, we know that Kemi Badenoch would like to increase the period of time from 5 years to 10 years for indefinite leave to remain. Yes, we know that she now has reluctantly agreed to leave the ECHR. But beyond that, we've got no vision of where the Tory party is on immigration. And then there's another party, the leader of which has made a living on the back of calling out mass immigration for the last 25 years. But that party hasn't come up with a policy on immigration. Do we know what net zero migration means? That's the headline, but actually net zero migration could mean 1 million people coming in each year, as long as 1 million Brits leave each year. It's about as daft a brush as a policy as you could possibly come up with. And it's vital, therefore, that if these parties wish to champion the United Kingdom and the British people, if that's what they claim they wish to do, they need to come up with a comprehensive immigration policy for illegal migration and mass migration. And even though we're only 6 months old, or 2 months since we got our registration with the Electoral Commission, you will see from this brand new party a complete holistic approach to how we're going to deal with immigration. So it's not rocket science. These other parties could do it if they wish to. They just haven't got the courage to do it. The first thing we have to remember is that this is a national emergency. Our population is growing rapidly, not because we're all reproducing like rabbits, but because we have taken our borders down. This is an emergency. So the first thing an advanced UK government will do is declare a national emergency and use we will use the authority given to the government after having been elected under that mandate. We will use the authority given by the national emergency to pass the laws that we need to pass to save the country being completely taken over by foreigners. This policy, like the last one, is in draft. It is a much thicker document that the committee responsible for it. The document itself is much thicker than the points I'm going to go through, but I'm going to pull on the main parts of that policy, focusing on the national emergency aspects. So this is not the policy that you may see into the long term from an advanced UK government. This is the immigration policy that we will use to settle the United Kingdom, save it from the trajectory that it's currently on. The other political parties are skirting around the issue. How is it that simply through the effluxion of time in this country as a foreigner that you suddenly get the right to stay here forever? How is it that we will take people in and say, well, as long as you're here for 5 years, you can break the law, you can be on benefits, you don't have to work, we'll look after you, and as long as you're here for 5 years, we'll then make you a British citizen. Well, no, sorry, forgive me. We will give you indefinite leave to remain. It doesn't make any sense. If you come to this country on a visa, either for student purposes or for work, you discharge whatever the permissions are, that you use the permissions that you had under that visa, and then you graciously absent yourself from the country. It's obvious, so we will abolish the granting, any further granting of indefinite leave to remain. But it's already taken quite a grip of the country, the Boris wave of immigrants, remember the guy who said he'd deliver Brexit and stop immigration? He actually let 5 million people into the country under his tenure. And if we don't reverse indefinitely to remain back to a point in time where that Boris wave began, we will not be able to save the United Kingdom. So we have to not just abolish ILR, we have to reverse it back to 2019 when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. And we've got to stop. We've got to stop. We've got to stop this preparedness to be all welcoming to anyone from any part of the world that claims that they're a threat at home. Asylum applications will be suspended. There will be no new asylum applications. And we will reverse back to 2019, perhaps with one or two exceptions, but we will reverse back to 2019 any asylum grants. I know for a fact that the civil service has been issuing asylum, the right to stay in this country, not because the people applying for asylum deserved it, but because they just wanted to get rid of the embarrassing backlog of asylum applications. They wanted it to look as if they've reduced the asylum backlog, and so they're rushing through the granting of asylum status. So we have to reverse that back to 2019 as well. And for goodness sake, stop giving away British citizenship as if it's completely. I spoke at some length in the previous presentation on culture. I spoke at some length about the contract that exists between the state and citizens. You can't possibly buy into a contract simply by sitting in the country for a period of time, which is where ILR ends up. First you get indefinite leave to remain, and then you're given a British passport as if it's a right. It is not a right. It's a privilege to be British, and we will stop granting foreign passports. And we've reached a stage under this national emergency where I'm afraid we're going to have to be pretty hard on people being allowed into the country for work. Visas will only be granted to people who are coming from a country that is on our new green list, which I will reveal in a second. We can't have wholesale mass migration from parts of the world that actually detest the United Kingdom. People have got to come. People have got to come from countries which hold us in high regard. Why the devil have visas been granted to students' families when they come here to study? What was the principle underlying that? It is ridiculous. So there will be an immediate cancellation of all visas granted to families of students. Work visas will be honoured, but when they come up to their expiry, the employing companies or public sector body that was employing these foreigners on visas will have to find British workers to fill those jobs. At the end of your time under your visa, it should be absolutely natural and expected, as I said, that you graciously go back home. This is our green list of countries. As I say, everything is in draft, so it may change between now and when the final policy comes out. But you can see from the list of countries listed that not one of them would pose a risk to the United Kingdom. And that's where we've got to go back to. Yes, we are an outward-looking nation, but we're being overwhelmed, and right now we need to protect ourselves. So this green list will define where we will take our future working force from, and students and people who we grant visas to. And the student sector has become a back door to actually coming into the United Kingdom, staying here for more than 5 years, getting ILR, and then getting British citizenship. They actually don't attend the universities. Many of them don't attend the universities that they were intended to, they were given a visa to attend. So we will require any student visas granted for that student to pay all their fees up front. That's a focus for our There are 1.5 million foreigners in the country, 775,000, I think, from the European Union, who come from the withdrawal agreement, and I'm going to come back to that. The rest from other parts of the world, who are getting the benefit of our ridiculously generous state welfare system. It's costing us the thick end. These are the official figures. I think the figure's much higher. It's costing us the thick end of £10 billion a year officially. But 1.5 million times 10,000 each takes you automatically to 15 billion. And it's probably higher than that as well. I'm sure we all know that. So benefits for foreigners has to stop. Why did we even think that was a good idea? It's not an extreme policy not to give foreigners benefits. What is extreme as a policy is to do that in the first place. And we're going to encourage people who are here, foreigners who are in the country, to go home. That too should not be an extreme policy. It should not be regarded as extreme. Yes, it's radical compared to where we have been with this influx of immigration. But not once in the last 30 years, not once in the last 30 years have the British people voted for mass migration. Every single election, we have voted for less migration. We want it stopped. So it shouldn't be offensive to anyone that we encourage foreigners to go under through a consensual repatriation program where they're given time-limited incentives to leave the country. And then the other thing that we seem to have forgotten is that if you're here on a visa and you overstay your visa and refuse to remove yourself, actually you're now in the United Kingdom illegally. But we don't recognize that. We think they've come on a visa, we don't know where they are, we'll turn a blind eye, they can stay, they can go on benefits, they can take jobs from British workers and so on, and they can stay in the country. The first step is to classify anyone in this country who is here on an expired visa as being here illegally. And once we've cut mass migration and encouraged some people to go home, as I mentioned again in our culture policy, the importance there being the reintroduction of aspiration, the work ethic, and so on, we are going to have to replace those immigrants on whom we've become so dependent and so lazy in our own habits. We're going to have to replace them with British citizens. We're going to have to encourage British citizens to come back into the workplace. As I mentioned, there are 8 million British citizens on universal credit at the moment, 4 million of which are not even looking for a job. They're not even looking for a job. I do not accept for one moment that all 4 million have such significant issues with themselves that they are unable to come back into work. That 4 million figure back in 2018 was 1 million. That's how accelerated our state of dependency has become. So we have to refuse to pay welfare to people who refuse to work. And to encourage them to work, we need to take the knee of the state off the neck of the working and middle classes in this country. We must reduce taxes. It's actually of cultural, national importance. And if you can do the maths yourself. If you take away benefits of £10,000 or £15,000 a year from someone, and you then start collecting tax of £3,000 to £5,000 a year from that same person who is now working, the British taxpayer, the state of the United Kingdom, is better off by £20,000 a head. It's good economics. It's basic 101 economics. The Labour government doesn't get it. They tried to reduce the welfare bill by £5 billion. Do you remember this fiasco? They tried to reduce the welfare bill by £5 billion, which represents 1.6% of our welfare bill. They had such a debate amongst themselves that they ended up actually spending more at the end of the debate in Parliament. It is an utter joke. An advanced UK government will absolutely cut welfare and cut taxes, get people back into work, improve their mental health issues as a result of that, and make sure that the British state is wealthier as a result of that. And the next slide comes to something that, again, no government of which I'm aware has done in the past. We take people into this country, we give them a visa, we give them all the rights to roam and to work and to take our benefits and so on, and we ask for nothing in return. We don't even ask for some basic commitments in return. Well, every visa granted under an advanced UK government will require the adherence to what we now call our new residence covenant. They must obey the law. If they break the law, their visa is cancelled. They must only engage in the activity permitted by their visa. Why should they engage in any other activity? And of course, they shouldn't be engaging in political activity. We don't want foreigners coming to this country under visas and then using their opportunity in this country to promote foreign interests. They will not be allowed to advocate for foreign countries. They will not be allowed to process down Hyde Park, down through Parliament Square, and abuse the British people on their route. That will be stopped. And they will not be allowed to proselytise, to convert British people to whatever their ideology is. That too cannot be allowed. So any breach of the resident covenant, which will be embedded in every visa, retrospectively as well, by the way, will result in the cancellation of the visa, the individual being classified as being here illegally, and then they will suffer the consequences, which I will come to in a second, of illegal migration. Somehow, the government has convinced itself, and many in this country, that stopping illegal migration is somehow an extreme thing. That actually illegal migration is the way of the future, that climate change is giving rise to large movements of people, that there's an inability through our adherence to the European Convention of Human Rights for us to actually stamp our foot down and say, no, you're not coming into our country illegally. The extreme policy here is not stopping people at our front door. The extreme policy is opening our front door and welcoming everyone in. It makes no sense. So in addition, obviously, to stopping, granting them the right to stay in four-star hotels, on our air bases, in our social housing, getting free medical care, free dental care, free iPad, translators, cash in their back pocket, and goodness knows what else. Instead of that, we're going to do something radical. It's not extreme, it's radical because it changes from the past. we will recognize them to be what they are, which is here illegally. They would have broken our laws, so they will be arrested, they will be detained, and then they will be deported to the maximum extent possible. There will be no exceptions and no right of appeal. Suella Braverman, bless her heart, she's made a few bad decisions recently. Suella Braverman drafted something called the Illegal Migration Act, which started off by saying that if you enter this country illegally, you will never be allowed to stay in this country. By the time it became an act, that had gone. It became a shadow of itself, and that Illegal Migration Act has never been enacted. We must reacquaint ourselves with the notion that British law applies in the United Kingdom, and if you've been judged to be illegally here and judged to be deported, you will be deported. You can't appeal. Why the devil should you be allowed to appeal? And if we can't get their countries to take home those that they sent to us illegally, then we will sanction those countries, or we will remove aid from those countries, or, failing all of that, this individual, I'm afraid, will remain incarcerated for as long as it takes for them to voluntarily get on a plane and go home. And the last point, there have been so many points which are really needless to make, but if you're a foreigner and you've broken the law and you're in a British jail, there are about 100,000 places in British jails, and 10,000 of them are taken by foreigners, costing us over £50,000 per head per annum to keep these foreigners in our jail. Why are they here? Deport the lot of them. The Royal Navy, once a phenomenal force for the United Kingdom, dispatched across the globe in order to do the bidding of the Crown, now can't even stop a flipping rubber dinghy in the Channel. And it's not because the Royal Navy and the naval officers and cadets and everyone else are incapable of discharging their duty. It's because their political masters are not invoking them to do their duty. The Royal Navy will be given full legal protection, and it will be instructed to intercept dinghies, turn them round, and invite them to go back to France. I know France is an awful country. We need to develop a bit of stiff upper lip and send them back there. And obviously, we'll give the Navy all the tools that it needs in order to do its job. And I tell you folks, if a dinghy full of single young men from Afghanistan, Somalia and wherever come up against a frigate that refuses to let it pass, I think they'll go back to France pretty damn quickly. They're not complete lunatics. And, Starmer makes a big thing about breaking the smuggling gangs. I don't know if he's aware that most of these smuggling gangs are based in Europe. It's there that the trade is taking place. There are members, however, in the United Kingdom who welcome people. And it's one digression. What you see, the people you see coming off Border Force boats and RNLI boats, they're the ones of which we're aware. There are many others coming across who are not intercepted and given a warm cup of tea and a Kit Kat on a state-sponsored British ferry from the middle of our territorial waters back to shore. There are many who actually, under their own steam, under their dinghies, land on our shores, and they are met by illegal smugglers in this country. And we must tackle those illegal smugglers. They must face the full force of British law. And, you know, for goodness sake, stop the payments to France. It would seem to us as well that the Home Office is hijacked. The job required to be done will not be done by them. So an advanced UK government is going to establish an immigration enforcement force and tribunal. And the IEFT, amongst its other obligations, will police the Residence Covenant. It will be the authority that is able to direct the police to take action where it needs to take action. And then to the extent there's a legal process which has to be gone through, it'll be the IFT that oversees that legal process. And again, there will be no right of appeal. There'll be no mechanism for some left-wing charitable entity interceding and funding the legal fees, or the government funding the legal fees of people who are here illegally. The IEFT will act, it will act decisively, and it will send people to prison and then deportation. In order to give effect to all of this, there are a couple of things we need to do, which I've already mentioned. The first is leave the ECHR so our Navy can do what it needs to do. We can detain these people, we can incarcerate them, deport them. Leave the ECHR, reverse the Human Rights Act. But there's one other thing that we need to do, and I love this bit. I love this bit. We have to denounce, as I said in my statement on culture, we have to denounce the withdrawal agreement. And I'll tell you why we have to do that. Because the withdrawal agreement has in it this Northern Ireland Protocol. And in the Northern Ireland Protocol, it doesn't just require that Northern Ireland continues to stick and commit itself to the European Convention of Human Rights, as does the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, but it goes on to establish also European Union human rights laws in Northern Ireland. And unless we denounce the withdrawal agreement, unless we tear it up, if we enact the policies that I've just described in Great Britain as distinct from Northern Ireland, every illegal migrant will leave Great Britain and go to Northern Ireland. It will become a repository for illegal migration. And this, my erstwhile party, actually put that forward as their mass deportation policy, that they would leave the ECHR in Great Britain, but leave Northern Ireland subject to EU human rights laws and the ECHR, making Northern Ireland a repository for illegal migration and basically not achieving diddly squat, because everyone coming to this country will know that they're safe in Northern Ireland. But here's the thing. If you remove the ECHR from Northern Ireland and EU human rights law from Northern Ireland, guess where all the illegal migrants are going to go? They're going to go to the Republic of Ireland. What a shame. And how do you think? It's so obvious, I shouldn't be asking the question. I'll make it a rhetorical question. How do you think the Republic of Ireland is going to respond? It only has one response, the Republic. It is to eject from its own body of law the ECHR and European Union human rights law. This is not the aim of our policy, but I just want all Irish citizens to be aware of this. If we do what's right for the United Kingdom, we will save the Republic of Ireland.
Well, I say that the English have been kind enough, respectful enough, patient enough, for long enough. I say love your country. I say love England.